Airtime is almost every single coaster enthusiast's favorite sensation on a roller coaster. Positive G's are the type of G-forces that force your body to be tossed out of your seat, with only the lap bar keeping you from flying out of the coaster and dying. Coaster enthusiasts love airtime because of how the sensation feels on their body, and it's just overall extraordinarily thrilling. Within the coaster community on YouTube, there are common airtime moments that are discussed and recognized by many coaster enthusiast channels, but there are some airtime moments that I've experienced and not a lot of enthusiasts talk about. Whether it's because the coaster itself is underrated or is not known by many people, or it's sometimes because people do not pay attention while riding roller coasters. Today I will be ranking the top 10 most underrated airtime moments I've experienced. Before I get started, please remember to like the video and subscribe to my channel. I'm still trying to fall into the coaster enthusiast scene, and you subscribing will mean a lot to me and be a big help in order to help me get there. But without further ado, let's get into the video. Number 10. Wicked Cyclone at Six Flags New England, the Outerbank airtime hill. This airtime moment is only at number 10 not because it's a weaker moment. It's because people do generally praise this coaster for its fantastic airtime, so it's not as underrated as the other moments on this list. Everyone does talk about the great airtime this ride delivers, but nobody ever talks about this specific airtime moment when the train banks over to the left, and then immediately twists over to the right as the train goes over the airtime hill. It's such a bizarre but strong feeling. You are literally getting thrown forward and out of your seat while twisting in a sideways direction, and your thighs slam against the lap bar in such a weird way. It feels overwhelmingly strong. This is without a doubt one of the strongest airtime moments I've ever experienced. Number 9. Revenge of the Mummy at Universal Studios Florida, the twisted drop after the launch. For some reason, Revenge of the Mummy as a whole is not talked about that much for some reason, because this premier ride's indoor launch coaster has some fantastic theming and an overall fantastic ride experience. After the first launch, which is insanely forceful by the way, it goes directly into a twisted drop in pitch black darkness that delivers a great dose of twisted airtime. The airtime on this drop does not jolt you forward, it just leaves you out of your seat while your thighs are against the lap bar, twisting your body downwards until your side bumps against the side of the train, which adds to the already insane airtime moment. I also noticed another airtime moment throughout the dark coaster section of the ride, but I don't think that specific airtime moment is strong enough to make this list. Number 8. Skull Mountain at Six Flags Great Adventure, the first drop. This is one that I've heard some enthusiasts talk about, but still not enough to match how insane this drop really is. Unfortunately, the sheer strength of this drop is only able to be felt if you're sitting in the very back row. Not even the second to back row will deliver this drop at its full insanity. Only the very back row. As a very long train is climbing up the hill into the darkness, you can feel the train start to accelerate if you're sitting in the very back row. As the train accelerates, you literally get yanked over that drop. You're being thrown in an upwards motion down the drop while your body is still being twisted to the side. As I'm gonna put it, this drop has insane lateral airtime. The feeling this drop has on your body feels very similar to Revenge of the Mummy, except better. This drop also delivers that insane stomach dropping feeling I always talk about. Do not underestimate this ride and say that it's not as good because it's a quote-unquote family coaster. A coaster does not need to be thrilling in order to be an enjoyable experience to ride. Number 7. Jersey Devil Coaster at Six Flags Great Adventure, the first drop. I'm going to admit that I have heard a couple of coaster enthusiasts briefly mentioning the strength of this drop, but I just don't feel like they described it dramatically enough to really indicate how insane this drop is. Just like on Skull Mountain, this drop must be experienced in the very back row. I know that on Jersey Devil Coaster it can be very hard to request rows, and most of the time the ride-ops are very rude about it. Every time I tried to request a row on Jersey Devil, they either just nodded at me or they snapped at me and got impatient. But that's besides the point. Not even the second to back row delivers this insane experience on the drop. When you are sitting in the very back row, you literally get flung over that drop due to how long the train is. First of all, this is the drop with the second most intense stomach dropping feeling on a drop that I've experienced. Second of all, the airtime is so strong. It's a very unique airtime feeling. It's not only that your thighs slam against the lap bar in a straight up direction, your thighs slam into the lap bar at the same time as the rest of your body is being lurched forward. I was not expecting this drop to be this insane when I first rode this coaster in the back row. People always talk about how great Steel Vengeance's drop is, but I honestly think Jersey Devil's drop is a lot better and more intense. Fight me. Number 6. Cheetah Hunt at Busch Gardens Tampa, the pop-up to the figure 8 turn. This coaster in general gets quite underrated due to the label the coaster enthusiasts place it under as a family coaster. I literally have no idea why coaster enthusiasts think of this as a family coaster, because I found this whole ride to be intense in every department. As the train crests the highest point of the ride that leads into the figure 8 turn, riders in the front get a sudden and violent pop of ejector airtime. This pop isn't that sustained, but it was surely surprising considering the expectations I had for this coaster were fairly low, because of what other coaster enthusiasts were saying. If you're sitting in the back row, you won't feel this moment nearly as much as in the front, but you will feel a little bit of floater on the drop off the figure 8 turn, along with that insane stomach dropping feeling. There's also another Airtime moment later in the ride, but in my opinion it's not a significant enough moment for me to put on this list. Number 5. Intimidator 305 at King's Dominion, the giant hill following the first turn. When you think about I-305, negative G's and Airtime don't really come to mind. Everyone more so just thinks about the intensity and the extreme positive G-forces that take place throughout the whole ride. And I get it. Intimidator 305 has more intense forces than Airtime. But a lot of times people think too much about I-305's intensity and they forget about the massive Airtime hill following the first turn. This Airtime hill caught me by surprise. Depending on where you're sitting, this hill will deliver a different sensation. If you're sitting in the front row, you will stay in your seat while the train is going up the hill, and once the train crests the peak of the hill, you will suddenly and violently burst out of your seat very strongly, and sustain there for a good 2 to 3 seconds. If you're sitting in the back row, you will get some more gradual floater airtime going up the hill, but the airtime still hits its strongest at the peak of the hill. The reason that I claim this is one of the most underrated airtime moments is because it's often overlooked by the ride's intensity and is easily forgotten because of that. So this one airtime moment shall not be underestimated. Number 4. Space Mountain at Walt Disney World's Magic Kingdom, the triangular bunny hill parallel to the lift hill. You know how when you're going up the lift hill of Space Mountain, and then you all of a sudden see a rocket go through an airtime hill that is parallel to the lift hill, and every time the rocket hits that airtime hill, the riders scream during that very moment. The reason the riders are screaming is because of the sudden and surprising nature of this airtime moment. This hill starts by going up at a not too steep angle, and then ends with a sudden change in angle by dropping its riders in a downward direction. This airtime pop is very sudden and jarring, and it catches so many riders off guard. It even catches me off guard every time I ride Space Mountain because it's so sudden, and just to give a bit of context, I've ridden Space Mountain more than I could count. This airtime moment is not sustained though. I would say it only lasts about less than a second, but it's so surprising and jarring that you suddenly pop upwards. The thing that also makes this airtime moment different from others is the direction that it throws you at. Most airtime moments throw you forwards and out of your seat. This one throws you up and out of your seat. Instead of rising forward, you rise upwards for only a split second. What I'm saying might be a bit confusing, but I can't find any other words to describe it, but I hope the way I'm describing this airtime moment still makes sense. Coaster enthusiasts, if you are planning on riding Space Mountain anytime soon, please prepare yourself for this surprising and underrated airtime moment. Number 3. Nitro at Six Flags Great Adventure, the drop off the mid-course brake run. This airtime moment isn't the strongest I've been on, but just like Space Mountain, it's very sudden. As the train exits the mid-course brake run, you violently get ejected out of your seat as the train takes a small dip downwards. This moment can be experienced the strongest in the back row. Honestly, this is just another sudden burst of ejector airtime just like the one on Space Mountain I mentioned earlier, so I don't really have much more to say about it. But all I'll say is to pay attention to this airtime moment while you're riding. It will suddenly burst you out of your seat. Granted, depending on whether the trim brakes are working or not, it will determine the strength of this airtime moment. When the trim brakes are not active, this drop actually delivers stronger airtime than when the trim brakes are active, because the train has more speed going into the drop when the trim brakes are off. This is definitely a hit or miss, so I get why this gets underrated. If you rode Nitro and you didn't experience this airtime moment, then it's probably because the trim brakes were more active. Number 2. Space Mountain at Walt Disney World's Magic Kingdom, the Mini Pop. This is another airtime moment from Space Mountain, which should give off the general idea that the airtime on Space Mountain is generally underrated. This specific pop-up is a lot stronger and more sustained than the other one on this list. Ironically, the other airtime moment on this ride I talked about earlier is a lot larger in size, but less sustained and more sudden. This airtime hill is a lot smaller in size, but the airtime is just a little bit more sustained and a lot stronger than the other one. If you're sitting in the very back row, you'll feel yourself pop out of your seat and slam against the lap bar, but if you're sitting in the very front row, it's literally 10 times stronger than in the back. Every time I'm sitting in the front and experiencing this airtime pop, I yell out of surprise every single time. It first throws your body upwards, and then it suddenly switches direction and then throws your body forwards at high strength. Since I've memorized the layout of Space Mountain, I always come in expecting this moment when the time comes for it. But I imagine how this might jar other riders who haven't memorized the layout, especially since it's hard to see the track due to the indoor darkness. If you're sitting in the front though, you might be able to see a glimpse of the track if the white disco dots are reflecting on the track. This airtime hill is basically lurking in the dark with the rest of the ride, and it's waiting for you to come so it can surprise the hell out of you. Number 1. Phobia Phear Coaster at Lake Compounce. The Twisted Drop. This is by far the most underrated airtime moment I currently know of, and is also the strongest airtime moment I've experienced on any coaster in my life. Yes, you heard me right. As the train is exiting the Heartline roll, there's a trim brake that holds the train over the drop, and then when the trim brakes release the train and let it drop, oh, forget about it. You're in for a fantastic experience. Note, the maximum strength of this airtime moment can only be experienced in the back row. You can feel some of it in the front row, but you only pop out of your seat once, and it's a lot less sustained and strong than in the front. This is because while the trim brakes hold the train, the front row slightly dips forward before it releases, but in the back, it still stays on top of the drop while the trim brakes are active, and then when it releases, there is much more speed coming into the drop. The sensation felt in the back is absolutely insane. You get suddenly jolted out of your seat and your thighs slam against the lap bar at such strong force, and you sustain there for a good 3 seconds. Not to mention that the laterals twist you to the side while you're sustained against the lap bar, adding to the extreme forces you can experience during this moment. There was one time where I managed to give myself a lot of room between my thighs and the lap bar, and I was literally standing up during this drop. It almost felt like I was going to fall out and die. The Skyrocket 2s at the SeaWorld and Busch Gardens parks have 3 cars, unlike Phobia which only has 2, and I can't even imagine how this drop feels like in the back row of the 3rd car on those Skyrocket 2s. I am super excited to find out when I visit Busch Gardens Tampa next month, and Tigris might take up the spot in my rankings for the strongest airtime moment I've experienced. I think this specific airtime moment on Phobia gets underrated because it's at a smaller park, with a much more popular coaster that is also known for airtime, and that is a lot more known throughout the coaster community. And Phobia Phear gets a bit overshadowed by Boulder Dash. But this exact same ride is at 2 very popular parks, in Busch Gardens Tampa and Busch Gardens Williamsburg. So why is it not talked about with those coasters? Well, I also think the coaster enthusiasts kind of forget about it and assume it's not going to be good just because it's a cloned ride, which is a pattern I've also noticed with other cloned rides too. Those are the most underrated airtime moments I've experienced in my opinion. If you're watching this video and are about to go on one of these roller coasters I've mentioned, please look out for those moments and then tell me in the comments below whether you felt it at its full strength or not, or if you even noticed it in the first place. Please make sure to follow my Instagram. The link is in the description. Thanks for watching, and see you all next time.